Hi, welcome. We are going to start chapter 5 today, and chapter 5 is all about tissues. So in this first video, what we're going to talk about are the first 22 slides, and those 22 slides cover an introduction to what are tissues. And then the first type of tissue that we're going to talk about is epithelial tissue. So I'm going to go ahead and pull up our slides so that we can get started. And let's talk about first, what are tissues? So your body is made up of trillions of cells, and all of those cells are organized in a very specific way, and that's really important. Of those 100 trillion cells, there's about 200 different types of cells, and we are going to you learned all about cells in Biology 112, cell biology. And now what we're going to do is we're going to look at how those cells stick together and they form tissues, and they have a shared purpose. So in our class, we're going to be working in this section specifically, we're going to be talking about 20 different types of tissues that you're going to learn that are under the four major categories, the four primary categories of tissues. So what is a tissue? A tissue is a group of cells that are attached to each other, and they have a shared function. So histology is the study of tissues, and we talked about that in the first chapter. So histology and histologists are people who specifically look at groups of tissues and how those tissues are arranged. We can think about tissues as in like layers of a sandwich. So one type of tissue might be bread, one type of tissue might be peanut butter, one type of tissue might be jelly. And when you put them all together, you form an organ. So in this chapter, what we're going to do is focus on the different types of tissue, the different types of parts of a sandwich. When you put them together, they have to be put together in the right order to make a good sandwich. The same thing is true with an organ, right? When organs are put together incorrectly, they're going to cause disease or problems. Cancer is the most obvious one. When we look at a tissue, a cancerous tissue, it's organized totally wrong. So if we're thinking about sandwiches, it's like the peanut butter's on the top of the bread at the top of the sandwich. And it doesn't work, right? That doesn't work as a sandwich, and it won't work as an organ. So when the tissues are incorrectly put together, the function is totally lost, and it's a big mess. So function is dependent on structure. Function of the sandwich, function of your organ, function of a tissue depends on the right structure to be put together. And so this chapter talks a ton about what is the structure, the structural anatomy of different types of tissues. So there are four primary tissue types. And within each of those four, there's going to be multiple subtypes. So first, what we're going to do is going to go through each individual primary tissue type, and then you're going to learn specific subtypes in there. In lab, you're going to actually look at a bunch of these and learn how to recognize them with a microscope. And that's probably going to be a very hard challenge for you. So in week 2, you're going to be week 2, you're going to be looking through tons of slides and trying to memorize these slides. So what you want to do is look for specific landmarks in these slides, specific structures in these slides to help you memorize what they are. So there are four primary tissue types. Epithelial tissue types. Epithelial is going to be anything that lines the outside or the inside of your body. So on your tongue, your skin, inside your butthole, all of those things are called epithelial tissues. So we'll learn about those first. Then connective tissues. Connective tissues seem like a hodgepodge of different kinds of cell types, all stuck together, and they're throughout the entire body. Connective tissue is going to be like cartilage. That makes sense, right? Cartilage totally makes sense. The fibrous connective tissue that makes up your tendons, that makes sense. They're connecting things. But then also in the connective tissue, we're going to include blood. Blood is a tissue. That seems strange. Bone is going to be a connective tissue. So we're going to learn about lots of different types of tissues that kind of go into that big pile called connective tissues. Then we're going to learn about muscle tissue, and muscle tissue is going to be skeletal muscle. So the muscle is attached to your bones. cardiac muscle, the muscle that makes up your heart, and then smooth muscle, the muscle that lines your digestive organs and other tubes inside your body. And then the last tissue type, main tissue type, is the nervous system. And in the nervous system, what we're going to talk about are neurons and glial cells. So in this video, what we're going to talk about specifically are the epithelial tissues. But four primary tissue types: epithelial, connective, muscle, and nervous. All right. And then within these primary tissue types, there are going to be subtypes that we're going to learn about. So like I said, I mentioned with connective tissue, I said that there was blood and bone and cartilage. Those are different subtypes. So we're going to be looking at those subtypes as well as the general overall connective tissue. All right, so primary tissue types and then subtypes. So we're going to start out with epithelial tissues. Epithelial tissues, epithelia is plural, epithelium is singular. And this is going to be cells, and it can be a single layer of cells or multiple layer of cells that are lining the inside and the outside of your body. So wherever your body comes into contact with, possibly with the outside world, it's going to be lined with these cells. So we're going to see these covering organs. We're going to see these covering your digestive tract. We're going to see these covering the inside of your ears, all kinds of things. The epithelial, usually we find two different kind of cell types in the epithelium. We find covering epithelia, and these are going to be cells that actually make the cover. And then we also find glandular epithelia, and these are going to be specific cells that usually they're glandular, which means that they're going to be making and ejecting fluids or waxes or what have you. So glandular means that it's going to be putting something out on the surface of the structural epithelia. So in this picture, you can, or in these pictures, you can see skin. So your skin is epithelial, and that's a waterproof covering for your entire body. This is the inside of your digestive tract. So the inside of your digestive tract is lined with a membrane or a tissue. That tissue is epithelial tissue. And then here in this picture, you can see that this organ is wrapped with a tissue, and that tissue is made out of epithelial cells. Now, the characteristics of epithelia is that the cells are they're going to form sheets of very tightly packed cells that are bound together by cell junctions. So they're glued together in tight junctions, okay? And they exhibit polarity, which means that there is a top and a bottom of the cell. So if we look at this cell right here in the center of your picture, there is a top surface that is open to the environment. And then there is a bottom surface that is attached to something called a basement membrane. So the top surface is called apical. It's the exposed surface. And then the bottom surface is the basal surface. So if you look at your skin, this is apical. Okay, so this is the top. And these cells are going to be attached to a basement membrane, attached to the rest of the body, right? And that's going to be the basal surface. So the basement membrane is going to be made up of connective tissue, but it's going to be attached and glued down there to the basement membrane. Epithelia are usually, so they're sitting on top of that basement membrane, which is connective tissue. The epithelia, those sheets, are avascular. And this is a new word for maybe for some of you, but avascular means that it does not have a blood supply directly. So this is really important because the cells, like the cells on your skin, these cells don't have blood flow to them directly. There are no capillaries in the outside layer of your skin. That means that they don't have oxygen and they don't have glucose coming to them directly like most of the rest of your body. So how they get oxygen and glucose and how they get rid of waste is by diffusion to capillaries that are below their surface. So if you look here in this picture, up in the top hand left, this is the epithelial section that's right here. There are no blood vessels in that picture, in that section, but you can see blood vessels down below. And this is below the basement membrane, and this is in your skin. So let me get rid of all those things again, all that ink. Okay, so this right here is the epithelial lining of your skin, the outside layer of your skin. It sits on a basement membrane that's right here. And then here's the nearest blood vessel. So it is avascular. It does not have a capillary or a blood vessel inside of that epithelial lining, but there is one right below it. And then it gets oxygen and glucose and all of its goodies. It gets that through diffusion through that nearby capillary. Okay, another characteristic of epithelia is that these cells regenerate really, really well. They are actually dying. They are made to die and be replenished really quickly throughout your entire body. So these, like your skin, that skin is dried out. That skin is far away from a blood supply. That skin is going to be roughed up when you're working. That skin is going to peel off on purpose because it's made to withstand and protect you from the elements. Okay, and so that means that the cells lining underneath are really, really quickly mitosing. Remember mitosis from 112? Mitosis means that they're replicating and they're making new cells. The stomach lining, you have a stomach lining. That stomach lining is dying every 24 hours. It's getting eaten up by acid. It's getting roughed up by the food that you put into it. And so it has to be replaced really, really quickly. And so epithelial cells regenerate really, really quickly. There are stem cells that lay along the basement membrane, and they go through mitosis really, really quickly to replace the cells that have been lost. Okay, so those are the characteristics of epithelium. And now what we're going to talk about is the function. So why do we have epithelia? The most important thing that it does is protects. So it's going to protect the inside and the outside of your body from elements. So changes in temperature, toxic, abrasions, or organisms, bacteria, things like that. So the epithelia is going to be there for protection. It's going to be also regulating transport. So anything that's going to cross from, so a really good example is digestion. So when you have food in your stomach and then it goes into your small intestine, the nutrients have to leave the digestive tract and go into the bloodstream. It has to do that by crossing an epithelial lining, two epithelial linings actually. So the nutrients are going to be selected for, and specific nutrients will cross out of your digestive tract and go into your bloodstream, and they have to do that through the epithelia. The epithelia is specifically made to allow for specific transport to go across it. And then the last thing that really happens at the epithelia that's important is sensation. There are many different nerve endings that are in the epithelia, especially if you think about your skin. Your skin can feel touch, it can feel temperature, it can feel pain, it can feel pressure. So all of those nerves we're going to learn about, all of those nerves, specific nerve receptors, they're in the skin. They're in your epithelia. So sensation is going to be targeted kind of inside a lot of your epithelial layers. Oh, I guess I said that was the last function, but it's not. So those are the first three functions. The fourth function is secretion. Secretion is making ooey gooey stuff and then putting it out on the surface of the epithelial cells. So the gland cells that are part of your epithelia, those glandular epithelia, they're making fluids. So this is where we're going to find, I just mentioned stomach acid. The acid is going to be made in the epithelia and then put into your stomach. Your sweat glands. Sweat glands are going to be found in your skin epithelia, and they're going to be making sweat and putting that out on the outside of your body. So secretion is a big deal with epithelia. Absorption. I already talked about transport. Absorption specifically is absorption is a specific type of transport. Absorption is taking nutrients from one side of the digestion and putting it into the bloodstream. And then excretion. Excretion is getting rid of waste products. So that's CO2 and nitrogenous waste products. Those have to cross over a membrane layer into the bloodstream so you can get rid of it. And so epithelia are going to be a boundary that those things have to pass across. All right, so those were the characteristics and the functions. And now we're going to talk about the structure, specific structures and classification of epithelia. So the epithelia are going to be named by the shape of the cells, and then they're also going to be named by the number of layers of those cells. So I said at the very beginning that epithelia can be one or many layers of cells that are lining the inside and outside of your body. So how many layers are there and what shape are the cells? The shapes come in 3 different flavors. There are squamous. Squamous cells are very, very flat, like a runny egg that's being cooked. Squamous cells are very thin and easy transport can happen through them really quickly. Cuboidal cells are box shapes. Cuboidal cells are going to be really important when we're looking at the secretory, making secretions. So they're going to be involved a lot around those, the glandular type functions. And then the last shape are the columnar cells, and these are really long and tall, and they're going to have lots of different functions on the inside that as something passes through the columnar cells, they're going to experience a lot of changes as they move through. And so we're going to see a lot of cool things there. All right, so the structure of epithelial cells come in flat, squamous, cuboidal, or columnar. Then we can put these cells in one single layer, and that's called a simple epithelia. So simple is one layer. Pseudostratified is when we have, it's really one layer, but it looks in a microscope like it's multiple layers. So if you look over here, this is pseudostratified. Stratified means multiple layers. So this is pseudostratified. It looks like there's multiple layers, but there isn't. Every cell here, every columnar cell is attached to the basement membrane. Some of the cells don't look columnar, but they don't stretch all the way up. So it looks like with pseudostratified that we have 2 layers of cells. What we're seeing is this. Okay, so let's look at the top picture, okay? The top picture, there's one cell there. That is cuboidal. It's simple cuboidal. There's one layer of cells and they're cube shapes. What I've circled is one cell, and inside of every cell is a nucleus. So that purple dot is the nucleus. So if we can draw a line like this, that's one cell layer. The nuclei are all lined up and it looks like it's one layer. In the picture below, if we draw a line, it looks like there's multiple layers of cells. But in fact, every cell is attached to the basement membrane. This is called pseudostratified. So it looks like there's multiple layers, but there isn't. So we have simple, pseudostratified, and then the last one is stratified, truly stratified. Stratified in this bottom picture, we can draw a line through here, a line through here, a line through here, a line through here, and then there's even a top layer up here. So there are 5 layers in that bottom picture, 5 layers of cells. So that's called stratified. The shape of the cells at the top in that bottom picture are squamous. The shapes at the bottom are cuboidal. When we name this type of tissue, we will say that it's stratified, and then we have to name the shape based on the cells at the very top. So this would be stratified squamous. Squamous is those flat cells. Even though there are cuboidal cells here, we're still going to name it stratified squamous because the cells on the very top are squamous. Here's our basement membrane down here. Knowing how many cells there are and the shape of those cells tells us what the function is, or gives us a clue on function. So simple squamous epithelia. It's one cell layer thick. They're really thin, flat cells that look like a fried egg. It is the most simple. Squamous is the most fragile tissue type because it can be torn so easily. Its thinness reduces diffusion distance, which means that it's really easy to get things from one side to the other side, really easy to pass across here. Your blood capillaries are made up of one cell layer of squamous cells. Your blood capillaries are where you get oxygen and glucose into the rest of your body and where you get CO2 and waste into the bloodstream to get rid of them in the lungs. So your capillaries are a great example of a place where we have simple squamous epithelia. And that allows for that oxygen whoosh, to zip right through and for the glucose whoosh, to zip right through. Okay, so having a really, really thin layer also makes them fragile. And that's why we break capillaries really easy. That's why you have bruising. That's why you have bleeding. Capillaries can break really, really easily, but they're made specifically with simple squamous epithelia so that we get diffusion happening really easily. Function of simple squamous epithelia is going to be for that selective transport that we talked about. Also for secreting serous fluid. So we talked in the last chapter about serous membranes and that serous fluid that's kind of around the heart and the pericardial cavity and all the different cavities of the body are lined with serous membranes, and then there's serous fluid around each one. The fluid is made by these simple squamous cells. So we can find them in the blood capillaries, like I mentioned. Also, they're going to be in the alveoli, which is going to be the lungs. Okay, serous membranes, endothelium, and glomerular capsules. You don't know what those things are yet. So please remember that they're in the blood capillaries, and they're in the lungs, and they're in the serous membranes. Those would be 3 places that you want to remember for the simple squamous epithelium. Simple cuboidal epithelium, so one cell layer thick of cuboidal cells. The cells, you can see this is beautiful, especially down here in this bottom picture. The cuboidal cells are gorgeous. There's one nucleus, thick lining, and they're going to be really important for absorption and secretion. So they're going to be lining your kidneys. So your kidneys, they're going to be taking blood plasma, and they're going to be taking bad stuff out and putting good stuff into your kidneys to make urine. So that's where you get rid of waste, right? So lining that whole entire, most of your kidney is going to be lined with these simple cuboidal cells. Another place that we find them and that you will see them easily is in the thyroid. So in lab, you're going to be looking at thyroid to be looking at these simple cuboidal cells. What's the thyroid? The thyroid is in your neck, and it's a gland that makes thyroid hormone. So they're cuboidal cells making hormone and then putting them into the bloodstream. So these cuboidal cells are big on secretion of the hormones in the thyroid and allowing things to go through that way. So you need to be able to tell me how many layers thick, what shape is it, and then function and location. So for the location, I want you to know kidney tubules and the thyroid gland. Simple columnar epithelia. So this is going to be where we just have one column of one layer of columnar cells. So these cells are going to, the nuclei are usually attached closer down to the basement membrane. And we're going to find these, they're really big also for secretion and absorption. We're going to find these in the stomach. This is where we're making digestive enzymes. This is where we're making acids. We're also going to find them in the intestines, but we'll just say for the stomach. I just want you to know that they're in the stomach. And within these cells, these simple columnar cells, we're often going to find specific type of cells called the goblet cells. Goblet cells are mucus glands. They're going to be making mucus. And so here in this picture right here, that is a goblet cell sitting amongst the simple columnar epithelia cells. The goblet cells are going to be making mucus in our stomach. Our stomach is made, you guys know this, right? When you puke, you got the food that's all icky and gross, and then mucus comes out. And then, like, if you're sick again, you're just kind of spitting out mucus. The mucus has been made by goblet cells, which are part of the lining of your stomach. So the goblet cells sits there in amongst the simple columnar epithelia and does its job of making mucus, which is to protect the lining of your of your stomach. Another thing that we see on simple columnar epithelia are often microvilli and cilia. Microvilli are bumps on top of a cell, and their job, I don't know if I have a picture. Yeah, I do. Okay, here. Microvilli are on the left of this picture, and cilia are on the right of this picture. The microvilli are on the apical surface, and the cilia also. These specialized structures are on the apical surface, so they're on the line, they're exposed. And the job of the microvilli is to increase surface area for better absorption and better secretion. So we're going to see microvilli lining your small intestine, for instance. So your small intestine is lined with all these microvilli, and that increases surface area so you can absorb more nutrients and get more nutrients in. In fact, if you've ever heard of celiac disease, or people who are really super sensitive to gluten, if we look inside their small intestine, and if we look at their lining, the lining of their small intestine, at those epithelial cells, these microvilli are gone. Their body has attacked their microvilli on accident because it's lined with that gluten. So if the gluten is kind of attached to the microvilli, your immune system comes, attacks the gluten, and kills the microvilli and just squashes them down. What does that do? If you don't have microvilli in your small intestine, you don't absorb nutrients, which means you're not absorbing carbohydrates, you're not absorbing protein, you're not absorbing vitamins. And so that's one of the problems with people who have celiac, because of loss of microvilli. Okay, so the microvilli, their main job is for absorption by increasing surface area. The other specialization that we see on these simple columnar cells are the cilia. Cilia are a brush border they're a border where they're basically hairs sticking out of the apical surface, and they work together to move things across the surface of the cells. So they wave and move things across the surface of the cells. We see cilia lining our respiratory tract. So when you cough, you're coughing up mucus. The mucus has maybe caught bacteria or caught mold or caught dust particles that you've breathed in, and those have gone down into your trachea. The trachea is lined with these cilia that work that mucus and everything else it's caught back up to your throat, and then you cough and you spit it out or you swallow it. But the cilia is moving mucus upwards towards your mouth. Another place that we see cilia is in a female's fallopian tubes. In her fallopian tubes, she has cilia that line those fallopian tubes that are moving the egg towards the uterus. And it helps to push it towards the right direction. Okay, so these are epithelial cellular specializations. All right, so we've talked about simple squamous, simple cuboidal, simple columnar, and some of the other things that are on the columnar. Now we're going to talk about a very specialized epithelia that we find, and this is the pseudostratified ciliated columnar epithelia. So we shorten that to PCCE, and it looks stratified, but it's not. So we could draw a line here through the nuclei, and we could draw a line here through the nuclei. It looks like it's stratified, but if we actually looked closer, we would find that every one of these columnar cells, or these funky cells, are attached to the basement membrane and next to each other. So they are pseudostratified. They're actually just one layer thick. They have this beautiful cilia up here on the top. So they are pseudostratified, columnar, ciliated epithelium. They will contain goblet cells. Remember, those goblet cells are the ones that make mucus. We can see that here. And their job is to get that mucus moved around. So we're going to see these lining the respiratory tract through the nasal cavity, trachea, and bronchi. The bronchi are the biggest tubes in your lungs. Okay, now another type is going to be stratified squamous epithelium. So now we've got squamous cells, but we have many, many different layers of them, up to 20 layers. And they're going to get flatter and flatter and flatter as they get up towards the exposed surface. Cells that are at the basement membrane, at the very bottom layer, those are going to be really mitotically active, which means that they're going through mitosis and making new cells all the time, because the top cells are going to get sloughed off. So what I'm thinking of is your skin. The skin surface has squamous cells. They're just sloughing off, right? If you rub your hand hard enough, you're going to expose a lower layer of those cells. There's about 20 layers of cells here. The bottom layer is going to be fattest, and it's going to be going through mitosis to produce more and more cells. So we see stratified squamous wherever we see kind of where the cells are going to be exposed to frequent and severe mechanical damage. So your skin, whenever you wash your hands, whenever you use a fork and knife, whenever you use a pencil, when you're typing, you are putting pressure on those cells. So these stratified squamous are there on purpose to get sloughed off, and they're protecting you against abrasion. Another place, if you think about this, another place you're going to see this is inside the vagina and inside the rectum and the anus. So those places are rubbed sometimes, right? By either feces or by a penis or something else, right? And so they're constantly being rubbed and abraded. So we will find stratified squamous cells in those locations to help us protect us from that abrasion. There are two different versions of the stratified squamous. We have keratinized and non-keratinized. Keratinized means that there's going to be keratin. Keratin is what makes up your hair and your nails, and the surface of your skin. So keratinized makes it's a waterproof surface, and it's harder. Okay, so our skin, hair, and nails are made up of keratin. Our skin is going to be keratinized stratified squamous. Non-keratinized is going to be on a wet surface, in a wet environment. So that's going to be lining the mouth. Your tongue is covered with stratified squamous. Your rectum, anus, and vagina. Those are the ones that we talked about. So those are the ones I'd like you to know. So here's a picture. The pictures on the left are going to be keratinized. The pictures on the right are non-keratinized. This whole area right here, those are dead cells, and all that's left is keratin. So these are cells called keratinocytes, and they are cells that make a ton of keratin. When they die, they leave their corpses behind. The dead cells that are left behind are just keratin. So that's what you've got on the surface of your skin. The living cells are here. And these are cells that are living, and these, especially down here, are dividing really, really quickly. Okay, so this is keratinized. Stratified squamous epithelia that's non-keratinized is on the right side. These cells are living. You can see that they're more box-like here, right? And then they get flatter out here, and they're dead. They're dying right here, but they don't leave that keratin behind. So you can see where they're located down here. The keratinized is going to be like on the surface of your heel, sloughing off all the time. It doesn't hurt when it comes off. Here is the lining of the vagina, and that's going to be a location where we have stratified squamous cells. Stratified cuboidal cells are going to be they're going to be pretty rare. We're not going to see them in 231. We're going to see those in ovarian follicles or fallopian tubes, or ovarian follicles are going to be inside of the ovary. You're going to see that in 233. Seminiferous tubules, that's going to be in the man's testes, and you're going to see that in 233 as well, and then the ducts of some sweat glands. So we are going to study sweat glands, but we're not going to actually look at these. But this is a picture of a stratified cuboidal, so it's only 2 layers thick. Stratified columnar, very rare. I don't even know where that's located. It says, oh, I guess it says it's in the salivary glands and the male urethra. So really, really rare. We're not going to see that. But stratified columnar is going to be very difficult to get across. Okay, and then transitional epithelium. Transitional epithelium is going to be epithelia that it looks like it's down here when it's relaxed, and then when it's distended, it looks like this. What it looks like is stratified squamous at rest. So this we see in the bladder. So if your bladder is full, it is called distended. So if your bladder is full, all the cells are stretched out and they look like they're stratified squamous. You urinate and your bladder is empty. Your bladder shrinks again. When your bladder shrinks again, the epithelial lining puffs up. And it looks, especially on the surface, these cells look like balloons on the surface at the apical cells. They look more rounded or cuboidal. They look like balloons, I think. And so this is called transitional because it transitions between a very stretched out squamous look to a poofy, almost cuboidal, stratified cuboidal look. So transitional epithelium is only going to be found in the urinary tract, and especially in the bladder. All right, so that is it for epithelium. This is a long introduction. There's a lot of different subtypes of epithelial cells. Remember, all we did here was we went through if it was stratified or simple. We started with simple squamous, then we went to simple cuboidal, then we went to simple columnar. Then we talked about some special characteristics or special structures that can be added to those simple columnar, and that was cilia and microvilli. Then we talked about pseudostratified columnar, ciliated epithelia. And then we talked about stratified squamous. Then we talked about stratified cuboidal, stratified columnar, and then lastly, transitional. You are going to be studying these in lab. You're going to be getting more interaction with them in lab. All you have to do is remember that there are 3 shapes, and then there are stratified, pseudostratified, and simple. And then in addition to that, you got the transitional. If it was me, I would be making a table with all the different types, right? Simple cuboidal, simple squamous, blah, blah, blah. I would write down the function, and then I would write down the location where you can find them. Because if it was me, and it is, making up your exam, I'm probably going to have a matching area for this, so that you have to match the function probably or the location with the type of organization of the epithelium. All right, so this is it for this video, and I will see you in the next video for connective tissue. All right, thanks for listening. Bye.